Some of Australia's bluest blue-chip companies, including Telstra, Woodside and Woolworths, are among the worst performing stocks on the ASX. The fight over energy policy heats up, and business class airfares are getting cheaper. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Tuesday, the 11th of June, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, some of Australia's bluest of blue chip companies have been among the worst performers on the ASX over the past year, with household names like Telstra and Woolies among the poorest yielding stocks on the bourse.
Last week, we talked about the banks leading the way. Today, it's about the companies who are dragging the S&P ASX 200 down. Telstra, with its 1.3 million shareholders, leads that list with its share price off 18% over the past year. Compare that to the broader 200, which is up 10% over the same time period, and you see how poorly the telco has done. Broadly, Telstra is struggling to compete in some areas of its business. Its enterprise division is an example, and it isn't seen as a tech leader in things like artificial intelligence. Woolies is off 14% this year as it rides the vagaries of both the interest rate and political cycles. The country's largest supermarket business has also been outperformed in some areas by major rival Coles. Coles' share price is actually down 4%, so it has definitely outperformed Woolies. Energy group Woodside has been sold off too, down 22% over the year. Energy prices, among other things, has pretty much driven that performance. Another big company to severely underperform is toll road group Transurban, which has lost more than 10% over the past year. It's been hit by expectations of lower interest rates and management change. The four are all top 20 stocks, and investors have really done poorly.
Sean, I'm kind of looking for the trends and things here, because those four companies are from very different parts of the economy. What does this actually then suggest for investors?
It's a bit of a cliche in investing, but it's a stock picker's market. A caveat first, any investor should be making these decisions based on their individual circumstances. We always recommend they get professional help. We are not an investment podcast. At the moment, the market is one where not all companies in a sector, for instance, do well or do poorly. Now, the banks are a bit of an anathema to that, but generally speaking, it's about knowing the individual companies. That's more important than just expecting a sector to do well or not do well. So take this next list of companies. All have done really poorly. They're in the bottom 25% of the ASX over the past year. So Fletcher Building, IDP Education, Sonic Healthcare, Nine Entertainment, Medium, Endeavour Group, the retailer, Domino's Pizza. They're all from different parts of the economy. The point to this is that when you're investing and it's a stock picker's market, it can just be much more difficult. If you don't pick the right stock, you can easily get badly burnt.
If it wasn't for Endeavour Group there, Sean, that was the perfect list of companies that tell you exactly what they do with their name, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fletcher
I
Building,
did pick them out that way.
IDP Education, Sonic Healthcare, obviously, Nine Entertainment, Domino's Pizza, well, that one's pretty obvious. And then Endeavour Group just had to ruin everything, didn't it?
Yeah, alas.
Alas, indeed. Now, what can we expect when the share market opens today after what's now been a 3-day break?
It probably won't be positive, with futures suggesting the market will start the day down about 0.5%. That follows last week's 2% jump on the ASX and then a fall on Wall Street over the weekend. As it has been all year, it is about interest rate expectations. When will the Reserve Bank start cutting rates? Or is there another rate hike in the offing? Investors don't think there'll be a hike, and they've priced in a 30% chance of a rate cut in 2024 and a 100% chance of a rate cut over the next 12 months. The big economic data out this week in Australia, at least, is labour force information for May. That comes out in 2 days' time.
And what about international markets?
Well, it was a big week last week with the European Central Bank and Bank of Canada cutting their respective official interest rates. The US Fed meets this week and it is not likely to move, but what it says will be very closely monitored, of course. Rates in the world's biggest economy are still at 23-year highs. Most movement in commodity markets will be muted ahead of the US interest rate decision. Brent crude is trading just under $80 a barrel. Gold's just under $2,300 an ounce. The Aussie dollar's buying just under 66 US cents, and Bitcoin is worth about $69,500 a unit.
Sean, perfect timing mentioning Bitcoin there, almost as though we had planned it, because I need to mention what our interview is today. After the show, you're speaking with John O'Loughlin, who is the Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Coinbase.
Yeah, so we talk about what's happening in the crypto market. So Bitcoin in particular, Ethereum also have done really well in recent months. And so we ask him why that's the case, and then we get on to some of the meme coins and things like that, and we talk to him about those as well. But it's just very interesting from John, his take on what is happening among the cryptocurrencies at the moment.
Yeah, he knows this space so well. He's really become our kind of crypto correspondent, hasn't he?
He has.
It is coming up after the show, well worth a listen. And also, quick mention of the Fear and Greed newsletter, Sean, which comes out tomorrow. There is still time, of course, to head along to fearandgreed.com.au, pop your email address in, and you will get the newsletter when it comes out about mid-morning tomorrow. Is there any kind of hints as to what you will be unleashing on tomorrow?
Plenty of really interesting stuff.
That is the kind of teaser that you give when you have no idea at this point, right?
Yeah, that's right. When you haven't sat down to write it yet. That's exactly right.
But I can assure you it will be a cracker. Now, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the fight over energy policy is heating up, and I make no apologies whatsoever for that pun. I think it is great. With Prime Minister Anthony Albanese yesterday saying Opposition Leader Peter Dutton is worse than Scott Morrison on climate change after the coalition restated its refusal to back Labor's energy policy.
Mr Albanese said Mr Dutton is walking away from climate action, and when Labor announced its policy, it had the support of interest groups from across the political spectrum. He said the opposition leader is afraid of the future. For their part, the coalition say they are committed to the Paris Agreement. Now, that demands global temperature rises be kept below 2 degrees Celsius this century. It supports the Paris Agreement, but the opposition doesn't like the way the government is going about achieving those goals. The government's legislated targets are a 43% reduction of carbon emissions below 2005 levels by 2030 and net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Both houses of Parliament aren't sitting over the next fortnight and will be back on 24 June. Given the election needs to be held within the next 12 months or so, we can expect campaigning to begin, if it ever stopped. And obviously, energy policy is going to be part of that.
And Sean, there's also talk about Chinese Premier Li Qiang visiting Australia possibly as soon as next week.
Mr Albanese wasn't confirming the trip yesterday, though the trip is definitely happening. Also in politics, all sides have slammed an act of vandalism on the US's Sydney consulate, where a man with what appeared to be a small sledgehammer smashed the front windows. There was also congratulations for two former state premiers, Victoria's Daniel Andrews and Western Australia's Mark McGowan, after both received King's honours.
Now, Sean, it was a relatively slow weekend for auction clearance rates, which wasn't really a surprise, was it, given that most of the country was enjoying the King's birthday long weekend?
The preliminary clearance rate fell to 67.3% across combined capital cities. Now, that's the lowest clearance rate so far this year, the first time it's dipped below 70% in 2024. It was also relatively low auction volumes, just 901 across the country. I suppose not a surprise, given outside Western Australia and Queensland, the rest of the country did have that extra day off. Running through the results, Sydney had a preliminary clearance rate of 70.1%, the lowest so far this year for that city. Melbourne came in at 63.2%. Given the average revision rate of minus 7.3 percentage points between the preliminary clearance rate and the final clearance rate, well, there's a good chance that Melbourne's final rate will actually come in under 60% for the first time since late last year. Adelaide continues to be the standout, very high clearance rates, 85% over the past week. Brisbane's early clearance rate was 67% and the ACT was 52.4%. According to CoreLogic, the number of auctions is set to bounce back this week, with around 2,300 homes currently scheduled to go under the hammer.
I love how you started out calling it preliminary clearance rate, and after struggling with that a couple of times, you just reverted to calling it the early clearance rate.
That's right. That's exactly right, Michael.
It's called recognising your limitations, isn't it?
Yes, Michael. Yes, that's it. And it's nice that you pointed that out too.
I have no doubt at all that you would do the same for me.
Maybe.
Oh, come on. Now, Sean, this is a bit of good news, right? Business class airfares are getting cheaper as airlines ramp up international routes and the leisure boom settles down.
FCM Consulting, which is part of Flight Centre, says the cost of flying business is 12% more expensive this year than 5 years ago pre-COVID, but the gap is narrowing compared to 12 months ago. 12 months ago it was 18%, this year it's 12%. Things are getting better. Economy prices are more stable, about 11% above pre-COVID levels. The Global Quarterly Trend report says it isn't all about COVID. The cost of aviation fuel and inflation has also pushed up prices. But with Qantas, Emirates and American Airlines all due to add capacity in coming months, That'll add competitive tension to the market, and hopefully these airline prices will keep falling in the same direction, will keep falling, going in the right direction for we passengers.
So when we say, though, that business class airfares are getting cheaper, they're still more expensive than they used to be. They're just cheaper than they were this time last year.
Yes, that's exactly right. But the trend is your friend, Michael. I've told you that many times.
Yep.
And, with aviation fuel prices so expensive at the moment, I reckon we'll get them back down in the next 12 months.
I like your optimism, Sean. Now, Australians hold China in low regard despite 2 years of better relations under the Albanese government, while respect for US President Joe Biden is waning, according to the Lowy Institute's annual poll.
Australians value the US alliance, but they're worried about Mr. Biden's age and capacity to govern. Australians are also critical of his approach over the Gaza conflict. If Australians had a vote in November's presidential election, 68% would support Mr. Biden, just 29% Donald Trump. When it comes to China, just 17% of people trust Beijing to act responsibly in the world, which is better than the 12% back in 2022, but it's still very low. 6 years ago, the proportion of people who trusted China was 52%, according to this Lowy Institute annual poll. Only 12% have confidence that President Xi Jinping will do the right thing. He's only ahead of Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The poll also says that while the government and opposition are divided over how to lower carbon emissions, more than 60% of voters support both nuclear power and renewable energy to tackle climate change.
All right, turning to international news now, and French President Emmanuel Macron has called a snap election for the country after his centrist alliance was soundly beaten by Marine Le Pen's far-right movement in the European parliamentary vote.
The European voting generally reflects what's happening in individual countries rather than the Eurozone, and Macron's move yesterday following that European vote is, to say the least, very high risk. He has already lost his parliamentary majority in France after winning a second term as president 2 years ago. If the vote at the end of this month, it's only a 3 or 4 week election cycle, reflects what happened in the European elections over the past few days, Macron would be forced to appoint a prime minister from another party, such as a centre-right candidate, in an arrangement known as a cohabitation. In such a scenario, Macron would be left with little power over domestic affairs. He still has 3 years to run as president. So a high-risk decision by Emmanuel Macron, but he's called that snap election. It starts on the 30th of June.
And staying on the same story, Sean, far-right parties, which tend to be less supportive of immigration and trade, did well in the EU elections more generally.
Yeah, so France was the greatest shock, but the far-right groups also made gains in Germany, Italy and the Netherlands. It looks like far-right parties will hold about 25% of the seats when the European Parliament next sits, up from around 20%. Those centrist parties will still maintain control.
Centrist politician Benny Gantz has resigned from Israel's emergency government and called for early elections, accusing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of mishandling Israel's war in Gaza.
Gantz, a former general who joined Netanyahu's coalition in the aftermath of the Hamas October 7 attack on Israel, said he'd decided to leave the government because the Prime Minister was preventing Israel from moving forward to a true victory. Gantz also backed a US-led push to free the roughly 120 Israeli hostages still held in Gaza via a deal with Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu will still hold a majority in parliament after Gantz's departure, but it removes a more moderate voice in Israeli politics. His departure follows months of tensions within the coalition with far-right and ultra-religious groups over the course of the war, with Israel still a long way from its goal of destroying Hamas and securing the release of those hostages still held with the militant group.
All right, last one, Sean. I don't know what to make of this next story. I mean, it seems like a good idea, but it just seems like it's high risk. From next month, Austria will allow postal workers to enter people's homes to deliver parcels to the general public because it's grappling with this surge in home deliveries.
Yeah, so the service is free, but a homeowner will have to spend €289 for a smart lock device that the deliverer, using a mobile phone, will be able to unlock the door. There's about 40,000 of them that's already been sold. The postal staff are then supposed to place the package on a designated doormat inside the house and then lock it up upon leaving. It's been piloted over the past 3 years or so. The National Postal Service said there's been no reports of security breaches in that time. First time it's been done in Europe, both Amazon and Walmart have trialled what they call limited in-garage delivery service in the US, but this is the first time that it's actually, going to someone's house and putting a parcel there. Interesting. I mean, Austrians are probably very honest people, so maybe it'll work there, but
How on earth do you know that? You just generalised about the entire country that Austrians are honest people.
Michael, if you're about to say that Austrians are dishonest people, you go right ahead and say that, but I won't be supporting you in that.
I wasn't going to say that at all. I'm going to say that they probably have a fairly standard mix of honest and dishonest people. And I would be concerned that maybe one of those dishonest people could be working within the postal service. And I, for one, would not be comfortable with the postie coming inside to deliver the parcel. I tell you what, if you did it in Australia, I suspect you would still just end up with the "sorry we missed you" slip shoved in the front of the door.
No, it would be on the special doormat. Sorry we missed you.
Yeah, that's right. The parcel isn't left there. It's just the slip.
Yeah.
All right. Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You are speaking today with John O'Loughlin, Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Coinbase.
Yes, all about what's happening in the crypto world, particularly Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then some of those meme coins as well. Great chat.
Yeah, it certainly is. It is up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is also where you can sign up for that Fear and Greed weekly newsletter out every Wednesday. So get in today and do it before we forget. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Tuesday, the 11th of June, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.